Hey guys, and welcome to Fika with Rice, a podcast about life hacks, inspirational life stories, routines, and keys to success. I'm your host, Fredrik, and each week I meet some of the most incredible people in the world, from self-made millionaires, best-selling authors, experts, and world-class athletes. My goal is to extract their wisdom, mindset, tools so you can use them in your daily life, but above all, to inspire you. Let's get this Fika started. Welcome to episode 13 by Fika with Rice. This week we meet the awesome adventurer Ash Dykes from Wales. He holds 3 world records. He achieved his 2 first world records trekking across Mongolia and Madagascar. And in 2019 he achieved his 3rd official world record, becoming the first person to walk along the Yangtze River, the longest river in Asia. In this episode we hear Ash's story about his methods of training his mind for something people call impossible, his training routines, and what a gift travel is. A very inspirational conversation filled with nuggets of following your dreams and achieving the impossible. This is Ash's story. Let's go. Hello, Ash. Welcome to Fika with Rice. I'm really stoked to have you here. You have such an inspirational story, 3 times world first records, and I'm humbled to have this conversation with you. Thank you for being here with me.
No, great to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you. I thought by starting this conversation, because you're a young lad, what did your mother or your father teach about discipline growing up?
About discipline. I guess they always kind of just taught me that, if you want something in life, no one's going to hand it to you on a plate. You've got to work hard. And by working hard, you've got to sacrifice a lot as well, a lot on what you love and what you enjoy doing. Knuckle down for the bet that you can capture that and live a better life in the future, type of thing. And so, that really helped in terms of pursuing my passion, sacrifice the little wins temporarily for the big wins later on. So I stayed disciplined and visualized that through this current hard work, whether it was working in a fish and chip shop, working as a lifeguard, it will all pay off. By not having nights out or as many nights out with the lads, stay disciplined regardless of me not being motivated. I will reap the rewards later on.
Did they put you in sports, or do you remember a specific moment that your mother or your father disciplined you or taught you a specific lesson related to that?
No, I'd say my parents are, very laid back. They are very great parents, very supportive. They weren't hard on me. They would prefer to see me doing something that is risky and dangerous, but really enjoying it and being happy, rather than doing something I don't enjoy and being unhappy, but that is safe and, safe here in the UK or here in Wales. So I think they knew that I was probably quite stubborn, and whatever I decide on, it doesn't really matter what my parents think. I would be going for it regardless. So they either choose to support me and be there for me, which they were. Luckily, they were very supportive. I just kind of taught myself a lot of stuff when I set off at age 19 about the real world, the real outdoors and whatnot,
What was your first job, Ash? Because you mentioned that you were working in a fish and chips shop. Was that your first job?
Yeah.
How old were you?
How old was I? I think I was 15. I'd done volunteer work before that, when I was 13. But my first paid job was at a fish and chip shop, locally here in Wales, working £3 an hour it was, or £3.10. Awful little job, just working with the spuds, serving the fish and chips, grim times. But that was the beginning, humble beginnings. There we are. And I then progressed on to a waiter, and then I was a waiter in my local restaurant. And then I became a lifeguard, which was better money. I got my lifeguarding job at 18. And that was, much better pay, where I could really knuckle down and save money that I needed to to travel because I don't come from a financial background, if you like. All of money that I needed had to be earned by myself. There was no one to hand me money, or there was nothing good to sell, So I had to really put in the hours, work hard, save the money. And so I did that predominantly through lifeguarding.
You mentioned that you wanted to save money to travel. Have you always wanted to travel since you grew up? Was that like a big dream when you grew up?
Yeah, I think so. I think, I probably didn't realize it when I was younger, but all signs were pointing in that direction, through stories that I would hear, through photos, in magazines, through online, through documentaries, like David Attenborough shows. Always sort of wanted to be out there amongst it rather than watching it from a TV, and I think subconsciously it was this deep desire was set in stone quite early. I just never really thought that it was possible. I thought you needed a lot of money to do these kinds of things. And then that's when I started working on the budget. I went from high school to college. I was doing a 2-year college course in outdoor education. And all of the rest of the students were going on to like university or the military. And for me, I just knew that neither of those really interested me. I knew that I would want to set off to travel. And then I thought, let's break down the costings. And when I did break down the costs to make travel happen, we are talking a shoestring budget. We are talking like £3-4 hostels, living with 18 other people. We are talking the cheapest places to go because we couldn't really afford the expensive places. It was just me and my friend. The cheapest long haul flights, maybe 31 hours. It doesn't matter. Let's get the cheapest plane ticket. And we realized that we could actually do it and it wasn't that expensive. And so that's what we were working towards, saving the money to make travels happen on a shoestring budget.
Man, Ash, like it sounds horrible, but like a lot of fun, like memories for life. I mean, that's what you're gonna be remembering and like laughing about when you're 80,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I remember one time just being in Singapore. And Singapore was a lot more expensive to the other sort of Southeast Asian countries that we had been to. And I remember this one specific restaurant. If you go back after 10 p.m., it's kind of like the leftover food. So it's the cheapest food. You get like 50% off. And I remember every day we would stay hungry until 10 p.m. before bed, for example, and then just go straight to this restaurant and get 50% off the meals just because we were living dirt cheap. That's a little example of how cheap we were living. We were only probably saving 50 pence or something, but that 50 pence can go a long way.
I love that. I've been to Singapore. Yeah, it's a bit expensive. You have cheap places too, but you really need to know where your dollar or your pound can go far away, right? To use the Singapore dollar there. But yeah,
you do, especially as a 19-year-old with like literally hardly any money. All of those extra pennies make a difference and can go towards another meal or some accommodation elsewhere. Luckily, it's not like that anymore. But back then, when I was 19, some 10 years ago, it was very much like that. It was very much like that. Which is just to look back on, you need to go there to get to where I am now, I guess.
So Ash, like you had these big dreams when you were 15, 16, 17 to travel, even younger, I understand. Where did you want to travel?
It was mainly Asia that excited me the most. I liked the idea of sort of America and Australia as well, but I thought that it's kind of a little bit like going home from home. They still have the same sort of rules. There's still the same sort of health and safety, which did my head in the UK. Communication's easy. It's the same language. Similar foods to some extent. Whereas for me, Asia was like a different world. That excited me. Different wildlife, different cultures, different traditions, different foods and delicacies. And not only Asia as a whole, but all of the countries within Asia are completely different to one another. And it was that really hooked me. I wanted an adventure. And I knew Asia would be the place for raw adventure, to get off the beaten track, to explore deserts, jungles, mountains, to get lost in translation with the language, to eat food that is complete, like, that you don't find on any Western menus. It excited me. So me and my friend, we very quickly decided that Asia would be the first place that we would be going. And it's, depending on which countries you go to, it's a lot cheaper as well. So the money can get you a lot further. And so we first went age 19 to China. And China was like a wild place. We got off the plane age 19. We've got people on their bikes offering to take us to our hostel, which was like 20 miles away, just on a bicycle, It was wild, and we couldn't communicate, and we kind of just dropped ourselves in the deep end, really. We didn't ease ourselves into this. We were like straight into the deep end, but we loved it. We were trekking the Great Wall. We were doing all of the tourist stuff at first. It was only a couple of weeks after that we decided to get off this tourist route and take on some mad, crazy, and dangerous, ridiculous adventures. And so that's when it pretty much all started at age 19. Just off we went doing these crazy adventures.
That sounds really cool. Like I resonate a lot with you, Ash, because I also grew up from very humble beginnings. My parents, they worked in a factory, like a manufacturing company in Sweden, like just like working with metal, like day in, day out,
Yeah.
So we didn't have a lot of money to travel, and I always wanted to travel to Asia, explore China, Japan. Like I was watching these documentaries like you. I was like, oh, this capital of Japan is Tokyo. This is the population. Like this is the main food there, and etc. and etc. So I always wanted to travel as well, and I made it my career, like to adventure myself and travel and send people overseas.
Yeah. But how did it start for you then?
The way I started, well, I went to university, to a business school, and my number one goal was, well, of course, to study and do well. But I was like, I need to go on exchange programs because that's what I'm gonna be able to go abroad,
Yeah.
And I went to China, Shanghai, in 2007. So I was 21, I think. It must have been more or less the same time, like when you went there the first time.
2010.
2010, okay, during the World Expo.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Well, I think that's when China started to open up a little bit more. 2010,
Yeah. It was very, very rugged back then.
Yes.
In the space of 10 years, it's changed an unbelievable amount. I went again in 2020, of course, for Mission Yangtze, and the cities, tell you what, they haven't all developed in such a short space of time. It's amazing.
It's true. It is true. But where did you go when you were 19 the first time? We're gonna dig deep in the Yangtze River adventure. But when you went there the first time, shoestring budget, 19 years old, where did you go in order to experience this adventure in China?
So I first went to Beijing, then down to Shanghai, over to Hong Kong, and all of this was probably about 2-3 weeks. It was very much on the beaten track, as I mentioned. We then went from China to Thailand and crossed to Cambodia. Went to Phnom Penh, and we were in Cambodia, and we absolutely loved it. And the thing that we loved is we could get off the beaten track quite easily. There was a certain amount of tourists in certain places, but me and my friend, we pretty much just took on little adventures outside the city center. That's how it pretty much started. We were then working on currency, counting our pennies, seeing how much we're spending per day on the Mekong riverbank. And I suggested, let's do an adventure. Let's get the cheapest bicycles we can find, and let's cycle across Cambodia and into Vietnam, and then the length of Vietnam. And my friend laughed. He liked the idea. He said, that sounds great, but on what bicycles? And there was this screeching noise behind us. And we turned around, and it was this little old lady cycling this sort of really old school grandma bicycle, if you like. And it looked affordable for me. I said, well, why don't we purchase 2 of those bikes? And off we go. They were £10, $10 or €10. And we did. We got the most ridiculous bikes we could find, and we cycled over 1,130 miles across Cambodia, across the length of Vietnam. And that was the catalyst. That was the beginning to what is now an adventure career. I found my niche. I found my passion. We were chased by dogs. We were hit by mopeds. We were dodged by lorries. We were spending about €1 to €2 a day. We were sleeping out in the sticks. We were eating noodles. We had no map, no technology, no phones, no pump, no puncture repair kit. We literally just bought a bicycle, got a non-waterproof tent for a couple of euros, and off we went. And that was pure adventure. We didn't see any other tourists. We were able to mix and mingle with the locals. I absolutely loved the locals in Cambodia. Were amazing. They would always invite us inside. I never want anything in return. They would feed us up. They would wish us well. They were just incredible. And that, I believe, was the hook. I think then I was like, yeah, it was crazy and we were hit by mopeds and whatnot, but that was proper adventure. I remember when we were cycling up the hills at nighttime, we would have like this tourist bus go past us full of tourists sleeping, missing out on this like scenery, on the night sky, and just watching a movie, a Hollywood movie. And I was like, no, come on, you're in Cambodia, you got to experience it, get out amongst it. And that's what I did do. Big inspiration for me as well is the movie The Beach. One of the quotes he says about everyone traveling thousands of miles just to wind up doing the same damn thing. And I didn't want to do that. And so, yeah, Cambodia and Vietnam, they were the catalysts.
Thank you very much, Ash. I'm so happy. My parents are from Cambodia. I've been there so many times. I know.
Have you been there many times? Yeah.
Yeah, many times. I love it there, and it's so true. I've been to, I think it's over 60 countries or something around the world. But I want to be humble, but there's something special with the locals in Cambodia. There's something special,
It was amazing. It was amazing. Yeah. Definitely some of the nicest people I've ever come across on my travels as well, for sure. And especially because it was the beginning,
Yes.
Sort of no experience at all. And I do say the locals can either make or break an experience. And the locals of Cambodia made that experience extra special. And that's why I also did want to continue. I loved it. It was great. And I will be back there for sure.
That sounds nice, Ash. What's the nicest thing a stranger did to you when you were in Cambodia?
I would say one that really there were many, but one that springs to mind is when I had a puncture on my back tire. We were cycling through the night. It was about 2:00 in the morning. And so obviously I couldn't cycle anymore. I had the heavy rucksack on the back. I had to push it up over the hills and whatnot. And we came across this sort of hut in the hills alongside the road. And we could see that there was a light on. They were like watching TV or something. And so I sort of walked in. I thought, a stranger at 2:00 in the morning, it's a little bit rude, but I thought, let's just try it. And I walked in and they greeted us as if it was like 1:00 in the afternoon. They came out, they were speaking to you. Obviously, there was no communication in terms of the language barrier, but smiles and handshakes. And I pointed to the back tire and they brought my bike inside, me and my friend inside. They gave us some food, allowed us to just chill on the chairs. And the guy was just nails. He sorted out the puncture within a blink of the eye. And wished us well, gave us some biscuits or some stock to take on our journey. And I was like, what? That's 2:00 in the morning. Can you imagine in the UK knocking on someone's door at 2:00 saying, I've got a puncture, will you fix it? It just wouldn't happen here. And so that was a special moment, something really nice. And, and they wanted nothing in return. Of course, they were just like, yeah, enjoy your cycle. Have a good experience. I loved it. But there were many, many, many moments like that.
Oh man, you're filled with these stories. That's a story to tell your grandchildren, in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Many like that. It's mad.
How did that go to wanting to cross or walk along the Yangtze River by foot? It's not something that you wake up one day and be like, well, I feel like crossing the Yangtze River for the next year.
Yeah, you're right. It's not. And so this is a build-up of many, many different adventures. So after that Cambodian trip, we then ventured into Thailand. And then we crossed the border illegally, effectively, but we crossed the border from Thailand into Myanmar via the jungle with a machete and learn how to survive in the jungle with the Burmese hill tribe. An amazing experience. Again, very humbling to learn only a fraction of what these guys know. And then after that, we then ventured further down Southeast Asia and went to Singapore, where it was expensive. We hopped over to Australia to try to find work, but Australia was a very expensive place. It was too expensive for me and my friends, so we didn't really survive so well in Australia. We were doing some mango picking and whatnot. I was trying to do some door-to-door sales, knocking on people's door, trying to sell Australian power and gas. Awful, awful job. Didn't enjoy it, and I did not last long at all. And we just started to miss Asia again. I think I had a once-in-a-lifetime 1-year visa for Australia, but we only lasted 6 months before we started missing Asia. So we thought, let's just sack this life in Australia. Let's go back to Asia, And this time we went to India and we were trekking the Himalayas. Again, no permits. It was all reckless stuff, not even the right gear. Trekking the Himalayas right up north on the border of Pakistan. We traveled the length of India, stopping off at different cities and whatnot. And then money was running low from lifeguarding. But we had a plan in Wales before we set off for traveling. And that was to become sufficient in scuba diving, enough whereby we only need one more qualification to our name and would be able to teach and find work. So we then went from India to Thailand. And luckily, for the next 2 years, I was living and working in Thailand as a master scuba diving instructor, as a Muay Thai fighter. And it was an amazing lifestyle, 2 whole years, just living the beach life, the extreme sports, the fitness, the martial arts, all of that. It was wicked. But there was something about these early adventures, like the Cambodia cycle, like the Himalayas, the Burmese hill tribe, that was just deep in my mind still. And although I was in Thailand living the life, I couldn't ignore my passion for adventure, and I just kept thinking over and over again, different adventure ideas. It became dangerous because I'm leading students scuba diving. We're at 40 meters and I'm thinking about like crossing Mongolia and trekking the Gobi Desert. And I'm like, I need to, it did become dangerous. But I did come up with a plan. And that was my first world record, was to attempt to become the first person to walk solo and unsupported across Mongolia. The second largest landlocked country. I'd be crossing 3 weeks over the Altai Mountains, 5 weeks across the Gobi Desert, and 3 weeks across the Mongolian steppe. Completely solo and unsupported. No film crew, no van following nearby, nothing like that. Low budget, very low budget still. My evacuation plan was so cheap that my insurance was invalid and I couldn't afford no helicopter pickup. It had to be by vehicle, which I'd need to wait at least 3 to 4 days for the vehicle to get to me. Whereas if I stood on the back end of a snake, 3 to 4 days is too long, I'm dead already. And so this was a low budget, again, another crazy adventure. But this was the journey that would shape the career. It was a make or break. There had been someone who had attempted it before, failed on all 3 occasions. He was a Navy soldier, a desert explorer, which scared me because I'm none of those. But I did believe in my training, my preparation, and I did surround myself with the right team to help me plan the trip. And I moved back from Thailand to the UK. I moved in with my parents. I couldn't even afford no gym membership. I was just, being the tractor tire up, flipping it, doing a lot of calisthenics base, trying to build up durability. And my mindset went out there to Mongolia once I'd got the green light, once funds had been brought into place, and that was it. The rest is history. After 78 days, 1,500 miles, became the first person to walk solo and support across Mongolia, which pretty much stamped my career. That was the beginning. That was the start. There were features on different TV shows. It was big in the press. There was TEDx talks, and little did I know it shaped into what enabled me to continue living this life and Then came Madagascar. Then came the Yangtze, which I'm sure we'll get to. But Mongolia was the catalyst in terms of the career.
Wow, Ash. I have so many questions about Mongolia because
Yeah, that was a long answer to your question, then, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine.
So we went
No,
3 or 4 chapters just then.
exactly. No, I'm just digesting it and I'm loving it. So thank you, Ash, for opening up. But no, I definitely have so many questions about Mongolia because it's one of my top 2 countries. There's Namibia as well that I would like to visit. Like I've watched so many documentaries about
Nice.
Mongolia. I'm obsessed, you know.
Yeah, oh,
But
man, yeah.
But wait, living with a tribe in Myanmar, entering like illegally, learning how to hunt. I would like to learn more about this. How did you arrive there with your friend, and how did you guys communicate with the tribe, and what
Yeah.
did you eat? Tell me a little bit more about that. It
Oh,
sounds like
sure. Sure. It's quite a
amazing.
funny story as to how that came about, actually. We were in a place called Pai, which is northwest of Thailand. And we went to Pai in 2010. Wasn't really, it was kind of like this hidden little place that very few tourists go to. And if you manage to get there, you're the lucky ones who have explored Thailand, you know? Now I think it's a lot more touristy and whatnot, and it's the place to go. But in 2010, it was just getting started. So we went up there, and we were like, "Wow, this place is great!" But as always, we escaped the center of Pai. We were like skirting on the outskirts of the small town, if you like, small city maybe. And we came across this local Thai guy, and he had this sort of bandana around his head. He had a machete. He looked dodgy as a guy you certainly wouldn't think about approaching. But we were walking past and he got talking to us and he seemed a nice guy. He could speak a little bit of English. And he was telling us about, this jungle trek that he would like to take us on, whereby if we can cross into Myanmar, there's a community trying to migrate from Myanmar into Thailand. So it's like on the border there. And I was asking about visas and permits, and he was like, no need. I was like, but we're crossing into Myanmar. And he's like, yeah. So we need a visa. And he's like, no need. I'm like, okay, no need, apparently. And he said it would, 3 or 4 day trip. We'll go there, we'll live with them, and it turned out, I think it wasn't necessarily supposed to be that we were learning jungle survival. We were just going for a walk through the jungle, sleeping out, and he was going to do all of the catching and the hunting. But it turned out, for me and my friend being so curious, we were asking him what he's doing. How do you hunt? How do you gather? So he kind of just took us under his wing and sort of shown us the ropes, if you like. And then we eventually got to this community. And this community luckily they were friends with him. And so that's how we communicated with them, is via him. And it was just this community in sort of mountainous jungle terrain, if you like. And they were teaching us like certain berries that grow on bushes that act as mosquito repellent, sort of natural DEET, if you like. They were teaching us how to hunt. They were hunting squirrel, how to gather. They were gathering fruits and vegetables. There were makeshift shelters that we were building from sort of bamboo structures, like a bamboo shelter covered in banana leaves as a roof, like on a slant. So if it rains, you've got the run water, and banana leaves as bedding. We were, fishing, catching frogs, a little bit of everything, really. It was amazing. I learned that you can use bamboo for absolutely everything and anything. And actually, this Thai guy that was with us, he loved bamboo so much that his son is called Bamboo. He named his son Bamboo, So it was just an amazing experience, just a short one as well. 3 nights, 4 days. And then we came back out of the jungle, but it was one of those that was pretty much straight after the Cambodia-Vietnam cycle as well. So it's like you had the cycle, then you had that experience at age 19, which was just mind-blowing. And it was all of these collated experiences that would ultimately, feed my hunger and almost go deeper into my blood. And I couldn't ignore that when I eventually did settle down, if you like, in Thailand. I was already looking to plan my next adventure,
Wow. By the way, I'm a vegetarian now, Ash, but I love
Yeah.
frogs.
So
Like
am I.
especially, yeah, they're amazing. Like in
Yeah.
Cambodia, they barbecue them.
Yeah.
Um, but how do you? Okay, before we go into frogs, what about the berries? Do you eat them, or do you like put them on your skin, or?
Yeah, on your skin. So the berries, you just literally, if you hit, that's the smoothie maker in the back, if you hear that. Berries, you literally just pop and rub them into your skin. And it's like this natural DEET, if you like, and it keeps the mosquitoes away. Just little things like that were like, oh, wow.
Wow. And how about the frogs? How do you catch them?
With bamboo, you pretty much created this cone-like effect and put them um, in the river as it flows through. You catch a lot of fish, you can catch frogs, and then you bring it up like 30 minutes, an hour later, and it acts as this funnel that allows the water to run through, but anything sort of bigger than this will get caught in it. And it's only a sort of small makeshift funnel using the bamboo, thatch it around itself, and off you go. There was only the three of us. We weren't eating a massive amount, but we sustained our energy enough to crack on, and it was only a short space of time. But I'm vegetarian now as well, funnily enough. I stopped eating, although I'll have no choice when I'm on an adventure or an expedition again. But whilst I'm back here training, I'm just like making sure my body's in optimum shape and condition. And so I like to go a little bit more plant-based for that.
How come you became a vegetarian, Ash? I can imagine it must be really tough for you in Mongolia, where there's not much vegetables, according to my research. But
yeah,
okay.
Yeah, I think it's only potato and carrots that you can grow out in Mongolia. Other than that, it's very high calorific. Your fats, your protein, your yak, your milk, your cheese, sort of your meats. Yeah, but it was pretty much the end of my China trip when I was, the last 2 months, I was coming across city after city. And after walking 50-kilometer days, the last thing I wanted to do was settle down in like a Chinese restaurant where I needed to now try to study the menu in Mandarin, and then had to try to communicate what I want. And if it doesn't get delivered, then I'm sufficient in the calories and protein that I need. And so instead, when I came across the cities, I could just go to fast food restaurants. And I was just pigging out on, like, my body really needed it. It needed the high calorific, the fats, the proteins, the salt. But I just didn't like what I was doing. It made sense at that time to get me through the remaining sort of month or so, but it was just too easy. And so I thought to myself, if I stop eating red meat to begin with, it's going to force me to study the menus and watch what I'm eating more. So that was the initial idea. So that's how it started. And then I couldn't just go into a McDonald's or a Burger King or a KFC or any other sort of fast food restaurant. I would go to a restaurant and I would take extra time in asking the questions and studying. But that's kind of the last thing you want to do, really. If you've been up since 5 a.m, you're covered in blisters, not just on your feet, but blisters on your back, you're sunburned, you're dehydrated, you've walked 50 kilometers, you then have to wake up at 5 a.m. the next morning to do another 50-kilometer day. The last thing you want to do is spend an hour and a half sort of ordering food, and maybe you get enough calories in, maybe you don't. You just want to go in fast, order the food, eat, sleep, rest, recover, and crack on with another 50 kilometers a day. So it did make sense a little bit at the time, but I didn't like it. It wasn't a healthy option. So that was the initial factor. But then I started to educate and learn more. And obviously there was the Game Changers I watched, Cowspiracy, Seaspiracy, all of that. And it's just like, wow. And so it's not just the benefit for your health. It was the animal welfare. It was the environment. Environment's very close to my heart. And, so help and do my bit where I can. I never force it down anyone's throat. It's their choice, their opinion. It's just what makes sense for me right now. But I do know that when I am on an expedition, I won't be able to keep up the plant-based diet because I'll be coming across nomads, for example, who will be meat-based. So that's fine. It's just about adapting, that's all.
Yes, I mean, you've been indoctrinated like like us all, right? With the game changers and Seaspiracy. But I mean, it's true, those are facts. But I can imagine, when you're on an expedition, it might be hard, like in Mongolia, out of nowhere to be vegetarian, and you're hungry, you're starving, basically. You just want to get something to eat.
Yeah, you got to eat what you can out there for sure, especially in such a harsh country like Mongolia. There's only I think the population's like 3 to 3.5 million. And it's massive. There's 4 million here in Wales, and Wales is like tiny compared to Mongolia. It's literally, you could fit it in a number of times. And so you're not coming across many locals, so you've got to carry food that will last a while as well. And it's very, very tough to get by.
Yeah. I just had another question about Thailand. Muay Thai, which I did for a few years in Shanghai, and you learn so much discipline. Like, I still remember the warm up, like over 100 burpees, like you're exhausted, like 200 mounting, like you're dead, and the training hasn't begun yet.
Yeah. The warm up is like every other person's proper workout, isn't it?
Exactly. But how did you get into that in Thailand, and what did that teach you?
I've always been into body mobility, functionality, movement. I was doing boxing here in Wales when I was about 16, 17 onwards. And so when I went out there and saw sort of the Muay Thai and the hype around it and the culture, it is the thing. You think of Thailand, you think of Muay Thai, it's really engraved into them as a nation. And I loved that. I would go to stadium fights and it would be absolutely brutal. And I come from like the whole boxing, I thought boxing is the one, but I saw that Muay Thai and I was like, boxing wouldn't stand a chance. It's elbows, it's knees, it's kicks, and they're brutal. It's not none of your karate stuff, like no offense to karate, but it's no light tapping, kick with your foot. It's like the most powerful kicks in the world, kicking with your shin. It is about killing your nerve endings to make sure that you have no feeling in certain areas, which is very serious, It's brutal. And so when I saw this, I kind of just fell in love with it. I wanted to learn it. And, I was there with my boxing stance going against a Muay Thai fighter. They would just chop my leg, jack it up. And I learned I need to eradicate, almost pretend that I know nothing about boxing and sort of rebuild myself the proper Muay Thai way. And I did, and it was competitive, yet, they have a healthy respect for one another, especially when you're sparring. They don't go, I'm sure you've had lots of sparring sessions. It's very gentle sparring. It's very fun. In boxing here, it's not fun. You sort of get competitive. There's the ego pride thing. Whereas out there, if you'll find a Thai guy and you kick him too hard and sparring, bear in mind, he will mess you up. If you kick him too, he's not, he just won't spar with you again. He'll be like, I'm not sparring with him. He doesn't control himself properly. He saves the real brute to fight night, And so I loved that. I loved the whole respect. I loved the motivation, the discipline behind it. They sleep at the gym. They wake up at the gym, train 2-3 times a day, all eat together. There's this bond and sense of community and respect. And I just loved it. Yeah.
I definitely hear you. I watched so many documentaries as well about, Buakau, if I pronounce it correctly.
Yeah, what an absolute savage he is. Jeez.
I mean, the guy is always walking around with Muay Thai shorts. I don't get it. Like, always,
At someone's wedding and he's there in Muay Thai shorts.
No, but I mean, I'm serious. They wake up, they go for a 10K run or whatever, back. Yeah. And then they start their first training, and then, they're always eating together. You're right. And I totally agree with you with the ego, Like, if you go really hard, they're just going to be like, well, I'm not going to train with you anymore.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, it was, taught me a lot. It was great, and to have many club fights as well. Then I went into the stadium fight where the guy comes over from mainland. And the winner takes home the money, the loser goes home with nothing. It's kind of like semi-pro fighting in a way. Whereas if you win, you can go back with enough funds to pay 2-3 months worth of rent, so it's quite a big payday for Thailand. But yeah, I just love the competition aspect. And yeah, it was great. I miss it, actually. I do miss it.
Ash, you don't have to be shy. Before this conversation, I did some homework on you. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but sometimes the internet is wrong too, right? But I mean, you did a few fights in order to pay your rent, no, in Thailand?
Yeah. You don't get much money as a scuba diving instructor in Thailand, especially because it comes in different classes. Like you can be an A class instructor, a B class, and depending on what class you're in, relies on what amount of work you're going to get. So sometimes if you had a bad month or a bad week in work, you could do club fights, which covers all of your Muay Thai bills. So you could do stadium fights, which covers your accommodation. If you win, if you lose, obviously there's no funds that you get at all. So that's why it's very competitive, because you have got the Thai local who comes over from mainland. He's not coming to lose. He's coming to take money back for him and his family. And so, yeah, it's brutal. It is brutal, but it just brings the stakes that much higher, and the adrenaline around it it's unreal. It's unreal. It's almost, I say the adrenaline, it's similar to that. Well, it's better in Muay Thai. But, the adrenaline that you get when you're doing a bungee jump. I don't know if you've done a bungee jump before.
No, I've seen on Instagram that you have done that. I'm so scared of heights. But this year I'm gonna jump from a plane. But okay.
Yeah. Nice. Well, if you ever get the chance to do a bungee jump, you're completely safe. It's all in your head. You're strapped in. You're fine. I know you're scared of heights, but just do it. It'll be the best thing you've ever done, especially if you fear it that much.
Are you scared of heights, Ash?
I wouldn't say I'm not scared of heights, no, but I think as humans, we all have this weird concept of being on a ledge, looking down. There's definitely, I don't think anyone stands there fearless, I think there's always a little bit of something, because it goes against human instinct, doesn't it, to jump off something. It's not what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
So whilst I'm not scared of heights, there definitely is to jump off it is intense.
Oof.
But I do like paragliding and paramotoring as well. I want to get my skydive license soon. I do love air-based activities for sure. I'm more land and sea-based, so I want to tick off my air. So I'll have all land, air, and sea.
That's cool. I should be trying that. I've been looking at paragliding. I would like to do that.
Yeah, you'd love it. You'd love it. And when you're up there, that's quality. Take your lunch with you. Happy days.
Oh, wow. Okay, Mongolia, we need to get into that. Like I said, I watched so many documentaries about Mongolia, and I mean, you're the first ever person who at least recorded who have hiked across Mongolia solo and unsupported, which you said. How was that? Because Mongolia is the country with the least amount of people per square meter. It must have been a very lonely journey.
It was very lonely. And I think Mongolia is the expedition that I feared the most. I had a lot of fear with Mongolia because all of my previous adventures, the Cambodia cycle, the jungle survival, all of that, it was always with my friend, Matt Norman, my best mate. It was me and him that we were out there in the thick of it together. And so, there's always two ways of decision making. There's always, someone to talk to, someone to motivate you or to motivate them. You've got the banter conversation. Whereas with Mongolia, I just genuinely, I didn't know how I would react. And I had a lot of experience with adventure, but it's different going alone. I didn't know, a big fear is I might just straight up quit. I think, I think it's all good when we're sat at home with a cup of tea, belly full of food, sheltered, and we see something on TV and we're kind of like, yeah, I could do that. When you're actually dropped in the thick of it, you're hit by that harsh reality of, oh shit, this is much worse than it looked on the TV. And when you feel the vulnerability, when you know that there's wolves around you and they will just snap you up like you were nothing, like you were a small meal, bears, especially in China. Mongolia, it was the desert storms. People normally barricade themselves in their gurs or their yurts. I wouldn't have that. I'd have to walk through these desert storms. And then when you realize that, again, the fork lightning, especially in the steppe, you're the biggest thing in the steppe potentially, and there's fork lightning, and you're pulling a metal trailer behind you that's attached to you. You've got the steep ravines where I'm pulling, again, the 120 kilogram trailer. You've got the wells, which sometimes are locked off, sometimes dry, or sometimes straight stagnant water. So how are you going to handle these water points? You're dead within 3 days. If one of the water points is closed or dry, you're dead, because the backup is going to take 3 to 4 days to get to you. Depending on how much water you're carrying on the back of your trailer, predicts on how long you can survive before your evacuation gets to where you are, because there's no helicopter that'll pick you up in a few hours. So there was all of these factors, man. And the fact that the Navy soldier beforehand, he claims to be the first recorded person ever to attempt the solo and unsupported walk, but unfortunately didn't complete it. He got about halfway. And even him, he was saying, how tough it is and, what to watch out for. And the list was huge. And at the end, he put this quote where he said, "Incredible is the ability to continue no matter what." And that terrified me. I didn't know what he meant. I was like, what does he mean? What does that saying mean? Is he trying to put me off? Which I don't think he was. He was a nice guy. And then I started to get on-ground logistics, professionals who know Mongolia, because I'd never been there before. And I got a strong logistics manager involved. I had the best maps out there, like Russian sort of military standard maps. We got the Royal Geographic Society for their sort of map work and research. If anyone had done this recorded before. And a lot of the people that I'd spoke to were just simply putting it down as impossible. I'd spoke to a guy who'd done the world's toughest horse race. I'm sure you know about it. They did the Derby horse race, where it's 1,000 kilometers on semi-wild horses across Mongolia, or a part of Mongolia. And they say even the horses struggle. So they said, what chance do you have pulling a trailer which weighs almost double your weight? Pulling a trailer the same weight as a world heavyweight boxer. And so it was all of this noise that got into me. And it did get to a point where I shut down the idea. And I thought, it's not for me. I'm not experienced enough. I'm about to go to a desert, living on an island. I couldn't get any further away from my current life. And so, I decided not to pursue Mongolia. I looked into a safer country, a more populated country. And then I just couldn't stop that niggle. I thought, just because no one's found a way to do it, it doesn't mean it can't be done. Someone will one day do it, and it can be done. Much bigger, greater things obviously have been achieved before. And how have they done it? They've just broke it down into manageable sections. They broke the big goal down of achieving it into lots of little sections. So my idea was to break it down, not into looking into the whole 100 days of Mongolia, but look at every single day until I can find that impossible day. And it was when I broke the map down and I looked at every single day that I realized every day is possible. So this is a possible trip. So I decided to crack on with it, search for the right funds, move back into my parents, sell my scuba diving kit, and attempt it. And so there was a lot of fear in the build up to this. But I just had to mentally prepare myself, and I mentally prepared myself by physically training. I was putting myself through the grits of it, telling myself worst case scenarios. If there's going to be wolves, expect to be attacked. If there's going to be blizzards, expect them to be the biggest. Not because I wanted to face the biggest, but I always believe that if I'm thinking of worst case scenario and worst case was to unfortunately happen, at least it doesn't come as a surprise or as a shock. It comes as something that I did anticipate. So all as I must do now is adapt, crack on with it, and tackle on through. So there is a lot of mind games with Mongolia. I was very scared of it at the beginning. I have to hold my hands up and say that it was not easy mentally. But I cracked on.
Wow. Ash, how did you, I mean, you must have developed some serious mental toughness, in Mongolia, and you said that you prepared yourself physically. Like, how did you do that? What was the training regime that you set up for yourself?
Yeah, the training was it was intense, man. It was insane. So as I said, I couldn't afford no gym membership, So I had my uncle who worked in like transporting. So I had big vehicles, and he always goes to farms. And he knew that I was in need of a tractor tire, and he said that he's come across this farmer who said that he's giving away these tractor tires for free. He just needs someone to drive them off to take them. So he obviously bought one round for me with a sledgehammer, and I got in my back garden. I had this tractor tire. I had this sledgehammer. I was flipping the tractor tire, building on my inner core strength. I was beating it with a sledgehammer, really working on my agility. I was sort of getting out in the elements, whether it's super hot, whether it was actually winter that I was training. So it was even snowing and raining. And, we're on the coast of Wales, where it's pretty grim weather. But it didn't stop me. 3 hours a day, every single day, pull-ups, push-ups, sit-ups, strapping a weighted vest to me, adding extra weight, almost replicating that of the rucksack or the trailer. I was working on absolutely everything, ticking off all components from balance, agility, speed, strength, reaction time, coordination, to make sure that my body was at an absolute peak condition, and taking everything that I learned from Muay Thai, from boxing, including that as well, and really, just building myself up as best as I possibly could, which ultimately really helped mentally, because the last thing that I wanted to do was to wake up early in the morning when I'm in my nice warm bed whilst it's raining outside and it's windy to high hell. The last thing I want to do is get outside in the rain, because there was no shelters in my back garden, and start beating this tractor tire and flipping it. But I did it. I said, in Mongolia, I'll have no choice. And that really helped to almost build calluses on my brain. I was getting out there. I was just really pushing myself physically and mentally, and almost just trying to face the harsh reality as much as I could here in the UK, to prepare me for the real harsh reality of that in Mongolia.
Man, like, I'm imagining the wind and the rain right now in Wales. 5 a.m., dark, probably 2 layers just to
as well,
keep yourself warm.
Yeah, exactly. Man. So you get mud all over you. You're covered in mud. You're soaked anyway. You're cold, but you're hot, so you're sort of creating this steaming effect. You're bruised. Yeah, your face is beaten. And you just put that shower on hot and just collapse in the shower, and let it just over your bruises and whatnot. It's great, and it really helped. I think it really helped when I was out there in Mongolia. It really threw everything at me. I did face snow blizzards. I faced sandstorms. I did almost die of dehydration, which the training, I believe, made all the difference in being able to get up from out of my trailer and pushing on. So yeah, they prepare. You got to be prepared, haven't you?
How do you prepare for a sandstorm? Like walking through Gobi Desert must be horrible, like probably 40 degrees Celsius, and you're like, your shoulders hurt, your feet hurt. You're carrying your the thing in the back. I don't know what it's called, not the rucksack, but the one that
you're pulling the trailer.
Yeah, pulling the trailer.
Yeah.
Like, what did you tell yourself to keep going? Like, what was the self-talk like?
Yeah, well, so the thing is with the sandstorms is you can't prepare for them really. Because there's nothing like actually being in the middle of a sandstorm. But what I could do was, I'm a big believer on visualization techniques, law of attraction, all of that sort of stuff. And so what I was doing when I was training out in my garden, pretty much this is what I was doing. I was always visualizing the worst case. So I was just picturing, I didn't know what a sandstorm had felt like, but from images that I've seen and people I've spoke to and YouTube clips that I've watched, I would be, whilst I'm training, I was almost putting my mind in that of a sandstorm and thinking, okay, what's it going to feel like? You know, what's the whipping sensation going to be like on my skin? You know, it's not just sand. I knew that it's not just sand that it whips up, but it's small stones and pebbles that are coming at you at high speed. So it's going to whip you. And then I'm thinking I'd need to get a fleece on. And I was thinking I need a mask for my eyes. I need to wrap my face up. I need even gloves to protect myself. And with the trailer, I can either just huddle down next to the trailer on one side, or I can keep walking on through it depending on how strong this sandstorm is. And so just by thinking this, whilst I'm outside in Wales, just being the tractor tire, it really helped me for when I got to Mongolia and I could see a sandstorm coming my way. It was like, right, okay, you know, you've been here mentally before. You know, this is what you've trained for. It's coming at you hard. You know, prepare. I got my stuff on and I almost visualized what the sensation would feel like. And I wasn't far off. I wasn't far off to what it actually felt like. However, it is completely different because, you know, now I am pulling the trailer. I have got rubs all on my shoulders from the 4-point harness wrapped around me. I've got rubs along my waist. I'm a lot skinnier and I'm a lot weaker. I am dehydrated. I am hungry. And my toenails have dropped off. I've got blisters and my lips are so sort of dry that they've split. So not only are they bleeding, but they're pussing up. And even in the morning, I'd have to pull my lips apart because they would dry over each other, especially that of the altitude of the Altai Mountains and the dry wind. And that even when I would drink out of my ration pack, which was porridge, I would drink from the package, and as I'd put it down, there'd be a flow of pus and blood from my lips. So all of this, I couldn't simulate when I was training in my back garden, you know? So I can think of what I can do and what it might feel like, but then it's that times 100 because you weren't visualizing it whilst being in all of that brute pain. But it helped to a certain percent that I kind of knew what the surrounding might feel like. You know, the visibility might only be 1 meter in front of me. You know, I might not be able to move forward because I might lose this little track that I'm on, which is my lifeline to the next war point. You know, all of this you've got to take into consideration, which is crazy. And that's I really did. This is why I had a lot of fear, because all of that is for one sandstorm. I've then got all of the rest of the challenges and obstacles and the wolves and the steep ravines and the stagnant water and the snakes and the fork lightnings, to all of them to almost break down into what each and every one will feel like, but they all have their own separate problems when you're actually in the thick of it.
Oh man, Ash, how about lip balm in the desert?
Say again?
How about lip balm? Does that help?
Well, you see, look, silly little mistakes that I made. I didn't take lip balm. Took no Vaseline, took no lip balm. Again, because all of my previous adventures were really roughed out. You know, they were really, you know, as I said, cycled Cambodia and Vietnam. I didn't even take a pump for the over 1,000 miles that I cycled. And so all of the previous stuff was very reckless planning. Mongolia wasn't reckless. It was very articulate, but there were little details that I didn't consider, and the lip balm was one of them.
All right, Mongolia. I mean, you have a very diverse population of people, right? Living there. You have the Kazakhs who live by the Altai Mountains and so on, different types of tribes in the north.
Yeah.
What's the strangest thing that happened to you in Mongolia?
Okay.
Because you don't speak the language. Most people, they might not speak English.
Yeah, I think it was a Kazakh family in the West. And the Kazakhs are amazing as well, by the way. And the Mongolian, they were just incredible. But this one specific family, I remember being in a hut. Again, my lips battered. You know, I think I was only a week and a half into the expedition. So still fairly fresh, but still like burnt up, windswept a lot. It was harsh up there. And I came across this Kazakh family that invited me into their sort of like hut. And it was very rocky mountains surrounding it. Snow on the peaks of the mountains still. They invited me inside, very traditional clothing. They had very, you know, woolly hat and whatnot wrapped up with jackets. And I was inside their hut and it was nice and warm. They were giving me some Kazakh chai, which was really sweet. I loved it. And I was there for about 45 minutes. And it was great, but it was now time for me to push on. I need to crack on, make the most of all of this daylight that I'm getting. And as I was about to tell the man of the hut that I'm going to leave, he was like looking at me very weird, very strange, like he was thinking. And I was like, oh, that's weird. And then he looked to his wife. And then he looked back to me, back to his wife, and then straight right there and then pointed at me and his wife and joined us up like that and then pointed to the bed. And at first, I was in shock. At first, I didn't really click. I was like, took a couple of seconds. What does he mean? And then it hit me like, no way. Is he offering me his wife? Is this a wife offering or something? Is it? And then I didn't know what to do. I sort of like looked at her. I looked at him. We were all sort of exchanging looks like this is awkward. And then I put on a fake laugh. And then a couple of seconds later, he laughed as well. And then I just managed to break that silence and, thanked them and made a swift exit. And, she continued to breastfeed her child. And I cracked on with my trailer back into the wilderness. And I was just thinking that whole time, I was like, do you reckon that was a setup? Was that them? Are they laughing at me now? Or do you reckon they were genuine and it was serious? Or because in the 21st century, surely not. Like, I do know that it's a thing to ancient explorers, but not in this day and age, surely. But I have heard mixed reviews since I've done my research. I've heard that, yes, in some parts it's still a thing and it's regarded like really hospitable. But then I've also heard, well, no, I don't know. I've also heard that that's not a thing. But he definitely pointed at me and his wife and pointed at the bed. So I don't know, unless it was a joke. Who knows? But I left that hut slightly bewildered and a bit like, wow, Jesus.
Ash, what was the facial expression of the wife?
She was just happy to be there. She was, she was just, had a child there and just kind of like looking. It was kind of like not a smile, but not a frown. Kind of like it was a normal thing,
Wow. You were saying that you did some homework after this, and apparently it's a normal.
Home, I was like, what is this? And I spoke to my logistics manager, and he says, like, yeah, that's the thing. He's got a lot of experience in Mongolia. But then I spoke to Kazakhs as well. I've got Kazakh friends, and they were like, no way, man. But then it's the same with Mongolia. The Mongolians in the city, they almost view the nomads almost like non-Mongolian. They view them as different. They're like, wow. So when I came out of the wilderness into a city, it was kind of like all of the city folk were asking me, what are the nomads like? What's their lifestyle like? And I'm not they're Mongolian asking me what the nomadic Mongolian lifestyle is like. So it's like, wow, it's like two different worlds. It's like they're not, which is mad, really. But that is just because it's such different lives, right? You've got the city life where you work in the 9 to 5, they're studying, they're in university. And then you've got the nomadic life, which is ancient, thousands of years. They're still living as they did thousands of years ago. And so, I guess it is quite a throwback for some of these city folk. And I guess they are curious if they've not been far out into the wild. I guess they do have a lot of questions about that,
Man, what's the strangest food that you had there?
Oh, the food. I came across some strange food in China and Madagascar. But Mongolia, what was the strangest? I know that their delicacy is, well, like the nomads, is the goat's testicles. And if you're handed goat's testicles, that's like a real honor. But I didn't personally come across that. I came across like fermented milk, like the whiskey and what else was there? A lot of yak meat, the yak fat, a lot of the dumplings, which I forgot the Mongolian name for that now. It was all just very high carb food, and they need it. Being out there in such harsh environments, they need those calories, those those fats and proteins, to survive those hardcore elements. And they're big boned as well. They're a thick set. Their structure, their hands are big. One of their fingers is like much bigger than mine. They are, they're brutes really. And their sport is wrestling as well. So the guys are tanks out there, and so you can tell they eat a lot of their sort of meats and fats for sure. The barbecue was famous as well. But yeah, no real strange things that pop to mind as such with Mongolia.
Yeah, I mean, fermented milk is quite standard there, so to speak, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. But how about Madagascar? What happened there? Why did you want, it's such a random place to go to for an expedition or an adventure?
Yeah. And Madagascar's always featured in my mind. And it features in many people's mind. I think a lot of people know Madagascar, but not a lot of people go. And when you think of Madagascar, you either think of its beach resorts or Madagascar movie. But not many people actually know what Madagascar is truly about. It's the poorest country in the world that has never been to war. 80% of all its plant life and wildlife found on the island is found nowhere else on the planet, which means it is the most, or one of the most unique countries in the world for biodiversity. I was walking across things almost every day that I knew would never be found off this island. The locals played a big factor. I am all about the locals, so I have no military training. All of the sort of the survival that I learned has been from the locals sharing their knowledge and me sort of being taken under their wing and being shown the ropes. And with Mongolia, I went over 8 days without seeing a single human. 8 days with seeing absolutely nothing. And so I thought, my next expedition, I want to come across more locals because I love the locals, man. I never like it to be one man and his endeavor, me and my journey. I like to share nuggets of information that people wouldn't have known otherwise, And so Madagascar, population of 24 million people at that time in 2015, and still a massive island. In terms of the UK, it's 2.5 times the size of the UK in terms of landmass. It's the 4th biggest island in the world. And for me, it was just unfamiliar. And that's what I do with all of my expeditions. I am interested in taking on journeys in countries that are unknown and unfamiliar. Mongolia, I knew nothing about yet. I had traveled across Asia for 2 years. And I'd met tourists on the tourist route time and time again. I didn't come across one who said they plan on going to Mongolia or they've just come from Mongolia. And as a scuba diving instructor teaching new tourists on a daily basis, I was kind of mind blown by this and curious as to what Mongolia would be like. And it was the exact same thing for Madagascar. Didn't know anyone who had been to Madagascar. I knew people who'd gone to Australia or America or India or Thailand, but Mongolia, Madagascar, no. And so I was very curious. I love dropping myself in countries that I know absolutely nothing about, because I know that once I've gone through this country at a walking pace, I'll be very, very knowledgeable on that country. And so the plan for Madagascar, it was a 1,600-mile journey, so 100 miles longer than Mongolia, yet almost double the duration. So Mongolia, it was anticipated to take 100 days to cross Mongolia, but I managed to do it in 78. And then Madagascar took me 155 days to do. I think when people think of Mongolia and Madagascar, they almost put Mongolia naturally above Madagascar in terms of toughness. But make no mistake, Madagascar was the tougher journey, maybe physically, whilst Mongolia was the toughest journey mentally. There was just no break in Madagascar. I was going through the tropical dry forests. I was going through the deserts. I was going through the tropical rainforests. I was going through the savannas. I was summiting the 8 highest mountains along the way. Bearing in mind, we're still on this one island, covering all of this terrain. It was machete in hand, hacking through the jungle. And they were I don't remember there being a day where it was just a pleasant day's trek. out of the 155 days, I can't remember thinking that was a nice day's trek, or that was just an easy, straightforward trek. I was held up at gunpoint by the military. I had to cross crocodile-infested rivers. I was bitten by spiders. I had to pry leeches off my skin. I had to hunt. I had to gather. I was lost in the jungle. I almost lost my photographer to a nighttime river crossing. I caught malaria and almost slipped into a coma. It was just, I'm sure that sort of gives it justice, but there were many, many more above and beyond those challenges that I had to face and overcome in order to get from the most southern tip of Madagascar via its central summit in the 8 highest mountains all the way to the most northern tip of the island, which luckily I did do despite those challenges. But it came with immense battles and struggle.
What do you tell yourself when you're about to cross a river that is filled with crocodiles?
Well, the scary thing is you don't even know if there's crocs there or not. In Madagascar, crocs are, tend to be all over in the rivers. But it's this dark, murky water, so if they're not resting on the riverbanks, they're probably resting below, or they might not be there. But it depends on whether you want to take that risk to find out if they're there or not, And so we never took that risk. There's always 3 ways to cross a river. You either cross where there's locals, because the locals cross it every day. But if there's no locals and it's like a wild river out in the middle of nowhere where there's no locals and you can't ask and they don't know, then you cross where there's white water, being the second option. There's fast flowing water. The crocs don't like to have their territory too close to fast flowing water. And then the third option, if there's no locals and there's no white water, if it's just this dwelling of deep brown murky water and you can't see to the bottom, is to build a raft. And that was always a pain, really. It sometimes take a good 3 to 4 hours to build a raft because you're just building it using bamboo and bamboo leaves. You sort of strap it together and cross. And that's the final way, really. We didn't have to do that too many times, building the raft. That took an awful lot of time and energy. But if you were unsure, then you would have no choice because you don't want to risk stepping on a crocodile or just being taken by one because you do hear stories along the way. I remember my logistics manager, who pretty much leaves the crew that filmed David Attenborough shows in Madagascar. He pretty much leads those teams. He's kind of like the face of adventure for the island. So he's a really good logistics manager to have on board. And I remember him pointing at rivers saying, oh, that's where that guy was taken, or, a little girl was taken by a croc there. And it's like, oh my God, he knows these stories. And when I first approached him to tell him that my plan is to walk the entire length of the island via the coast, he said, why do you want to do, well, he didn't say, why do you want to do that? But he pretty much he said, someone's done that coast route before. He said, however, there's this mountainous ridge, almost like a plateau, almost like the Himalayan range of Madagascar, if you like, that stretches central east of the island, almost the entire length. He said it's harsher. There's more temperamental weather conditions. There's less food. There's less people. There's a lot more wildlife. There's more dangers. And it's home to the 8 highest mountains along the way. No one's ever walked it. And so as soon as he said that, I was like, oh, damn it. I've got to do it. And so it was he set me that challenge. He was like, yeah, you can do the coast, but you've got food, you've got water, there's people there, you're relatively safe. It's not so wild. However, and then when he showed me the alternative and said, no one's ever done that, I was just hooked. And from then on, I was targeting that area of Madagascar, which I'm so grateful for and glad I did. Obviously, it was a lot tougher, but some of the communities I came across, it was stunning. Sometimes we came across communities that I'd never seen a Westerner before. And sometimes they would completely abandon their whole village. They would spot me from a distance. They would abandon their village, hide in the bush, and they wouldn't come out until I had left that village. I couldn't ask them for help, I couldn't ask them for directions. They are gone and then they're not coming out, which was crazy. In this day and age, And it's mainly because when the French ruled over 60 years ago, they were really brutal. And so their ancestors or their grandparents have left the younger generation with these bad images and bad stories of white folk, if you like. And so when I walked up, if it was that community's first time seeing it and their great-grandparents told them these awful stories who have now died off, they just see me and they're like, nope, not standing any chance, and they're gone. And I would see them physically sprinting. Sometimes they would run like down cliffs, falling, and I'd just be like, this is mental. Amazing experience. Sometimes locals didn't run and I was able to show them, that things have changed since then. And I'm not here to harm you. I'd be very, smiley, give them gifts and whatnot, and leave hopefully with they've got good memories now of so it's crazy, really.
Oh man, like I need to ask you, Ash, like when you were crossing Madagascar, did you have a crew with you all the time, or?
So with this one now, unlike Mongolia, I had a guide with me in terms of translation, and that was purposely because with Mongolia, I came across amazing locals, and it was just a shame not to be able to communicate. The record there wasn't to become the first to walk across Mongolia. Nomads have done that for thousands of years. They do it all the time. It's the solo and unsupported aspect. When the locals cross it, they take camels. They do it as a family unit. They say it's dangerous to go into the desert alone, especially with no animal. That's just reckless. You don't do that. So the record there was solo and unsupported. However, with Madagascar, it was just to do it, regardless of a team or not. It was a first, regardless of it being solo or unsupported. And so with that, I wanted to meet the locals. I wanted to get their stories. I wanted to be able to communicate. And so I had a different guide I had a guide who knew the southern region a little bit better. But it was never in terms to guide me, because the guide was lost himself. He'd never been here before. He just can communicate in that dialect, because the dialect, there's over 18, 20 different dialects in Madagascar. And then a guide for the middle, and then a guide for the north. And that was amazing. I was really able to communicate with the locals that way and learn so much more about their way of life.
Ash, you were saying that you had so many amazing stories. Did you keep a journal? I'm curious. Did you keep a journal, like when you were writing down your thoughts, or is there a way that you were keeping a diary or anything like that?
Yeah. I launched a book as well. So I had the diary for Mongolia that was written. In Madagascar, I left voice notes so that it was transcribed after. And then I published a book in 2017 called Mission Possible. And that's pretty much about how it started, about Mongolia and about Madagascar. And so that was collectively from the notes that I left from all of these journeys. And so, I was trying to document as much as I could along the way.
How did you do in China? Because, the Yangtze River, it's huge, it's so long. It took you 352 days, if I'm not correct.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
To cross that by foot. And there are so many wild animals in China,
Yes. This again was a different beast. This now took 2 years to plan.
2 years.
2 years, yeah. This really required a lot more effort in terms of logistics, because as China is super sensitive, I needed to make connections within China. I had a production team, I had a distribution team, I had a logistics and fixer team. I then had these guys collectively work and introduce me to the Three Sources National Park, because I needed permits to get to the source of the Yangtze River. It's heavily protected. But in order to get access to the Three Sources National Park, I needed to be ambassador for the China Development Association, for the Green Development Foundation. And it just was it went on and on. So I had to be made ambassador. I then needed to be made temporary doctor for a year to be introduced to the Three Sources National Park. And then in order to get access, they needed to introduce me to the government. the government needed to introduce me to Qinghai government, which he would stamp and sign off the documents and give me protection by the authorities, which I then needed to be introduced to and get the stamp and the signature from. I won't go on, but effectively, I had over 13 stamped signatures worth of documents in order to get to the source. And it was pretty much, if the police come across me and try to deport me, I've got the government backing me saying, you put Ash back where you found him and allow him to continue. Which is, potentially another first as well. And that was just purely because the teams that I had on board, it wouldn't have been possible without. And I did get pulled into government offices by the police on 5 different occasions. I got dragged over to Tibet at one time and questioned in the Tibetan offices and was threatened to be deported. But luckily, because of my support by the government, they had no choice but to take me back to where they found me so that I could continue, as much as they hated that, the government said so. So it was intense. It was insane. And so you had those issues. You had the wildlife issues. Now we're dealing with bears. Bears, probably out of all of the animals, bears are my biggest fear. You can't do shit to a bear. You can't do anything, and it was active hunting season for the bears. I was delayed 2.5 months from starting the journey. And my team said, abandon it, let's cut the trip and you can start again next year. But I put over 2 years of hard work into this. I believed in my preparation. I now believed in my experience because I had Mongolia and Madagascar under my belt. I believed I could get off the mountains before the depth of winter, which would plummet into minus 40 degrees Celsius at over 5,000 meters altitude. And I believed that I would stay vigilant enough for the bears not to, hopefully not to get close. But the locals suggested otherwise. The locals were sending me photos of bear attacks, videos of bears running into communities, chasing people, killing families in huts. And I was thinking, these bears are scratching down steel doors and I'm in a tent. So there was a lot of fear again. There were snow blizzards, there were river crossings, it was minus 20 degrees Celsius. There were the wolves. I was followed by a pack of wolves for over 2 days that were just on our tail for too long. It got a little bit uncomfortable. And I don't know how we made it off the mountains in one piece. We didn't go without jeopardy. I lost, out of these 16 different team members that joined me in terms of guides or in terms of videographers, 10 were evacuated due to altitude sickness, fear of wildlife, or other injury. I had a UK photographer fly all the way to join me for 2 to 3 weeks, and he had to leave 6 hours into day number 1 due to a landslide. So he flew back home. The Yangtze River was just chewing people up and spitting them out left, right, and center. Even my Tibetan guide who was there, in case I got altitude sickness, he could pull me off the mountains. It was the other way. He got altitude sickness and I had to pull him off the mountains. I was like, typical. What is this about? It was intense. But 6 months went by and I was able to then, open up the expedition. There was a different side to the Yangtze. The first 6 months was survival, wild, beauty as well. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't all just, jeopardy and threat for survival and whatnot. It was stunning and the people were amazing. And I had seen, incredible sights and wildlife. But then the second half of the journey, I was coming across more towns, more communities, until eventually I was coming across mega super cities, and so I could open up the journey because it wasn't as, we kind of traded the bears and the wolves for your snakes and spiders instead, and it was more interactive. I had Chinese celebrities join me, members of public, journalists. We were live streaming to millions. I was doing book signing events along the way. It's like the 2 different halves of the journey were like 2 different expeditions. It was wild. It was great. And I really loved it. And I was learning Chinese along the way. I was trying the delicacies. We were filming for my documentary, which was commissioned by National Geographic. all of the different locals and traditions and cultures and foods along the way. We captured it all, we captured all the environmental awareness around it, the sustainability, the change going on, the younger generation, how they're developing, the older generation and certain dying out traditions, whether that's good or whether that's bad, and how the younger generation perceive that. And, it was amazing. So I was out in China for 1.5 years altogether. It took me 1 year to complete it. It took best part of 2.5 years, probably over, to plan it. And yeah, we had to track that as well, of course. I have a tracker which monitors every 5 minutes. It sends off the coordinates, the longitude, the latitude, my exact speed, my exact location, for the Guinness Book of Records to follow it. So every 5 minutes, 24/7 for 352 days. And I think that took the Guinness Book of Records about a month to go through. I think because they had to look at every single yellow dot to make sure I didn't jump on the back end of a bicycle or whatnot. And they were looking at my speed, and it took them a while to officialize that, once they'd gone through all of the yellow dots for a year. And yeah, it was just a huge success, and then we launched the Nat Geo. I was invited onto the Joe Rogan podcast, and we're still here working on big things. The Rock's agent's now on board, from Los Angeles, which is crazy. And yeah, it just really took off from the Yangtze, and now being ambassador for Jaguar Land Rover. It's building and building. I still view this as the beginning of my career. Although there's been mad adventures in the past, do not get me wrong. I think that things will start getting even more interesting now as a career.
I'm sure about that, Ash. Wow. Just trying to again digest this wonderful and amazing and inspirational story, Ash.
I appreciate that. It's pretty wild, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm just thinking okay, let's talk about wolves first. How do you get a pack of wolves to get rid of how do you get rid of them?
Yeah, well, there's a funny story behind this as well, actually. It was me and Kyle, my videographer from Texas, who joined me for 4 days. And the day that we set off from this community, we were following the Yangtze, and it was leading into this deep valley, snow-capped mountains, rocky V-shaped valleys. And we come across some locals, and we ask them, we just make sure we're going the right direction. And Kyle films all of this for the documentary. He wants to capture me trying to converse with the locals in Mandarin. But they were Tibetan, so we couldn't communicate. And so this whole time, they look concerned, they're pointing, they're, doing certain hand gestures and whatnot, but we don't really know what they're saying. And I just keep saying, oh, Yushi, this way. And they're saying, yeah. But, and then they continue to talk. So anyway, we waved on, we were like, thanks, bye. We carried on walking. And then for the next 2 days after that, we could hear a pack of wolves. And usually the wolves they usually cover much greater distance than we can cover. So they normally approach you and then past you, off you go. But they were always on our tail, always on the other side of the hill for 2 days, and we were covering a lot of mileage. Anyway, they vanished, they disappeared. They were probably scouring us for injuries, seeing what we're like, seeing if we're food or not. Fast forward 6 months, and my videographer in Beijing has that footage, and she contacts me to say that what that guy was saying, because she speaks Tibetan, what that guy is saying to you is that only yesterday, right down that valley where you're going, a lady was killed, a local lady was killed by a pack of wolves. So don't go down there. But we didn't know that. So we were like, oh yeah, thank you, bye, it's ITN. We carried on walking, only to be stalked and followed by a pack of wolves. Little did we know, it's probably the same pack that killed that local lady. So I'm kind of glad we didn't know that story. We only found out 6 months later, but it's quite chilling when we did hear to know that there was a pack of wolves probably watching for any limbs. That's what they do. They look to see if you're injured to scout you, because they wouldn't really hunt humans unless they're really desperate. To hunt humans is quite a risk for them. So I don't believe they would have, not with two of us. it was probably like a local old lady that they came across, tried their chances and succeeded, you know. But the bears, on the other hand, are a whole different story. They do not give a shit. They will hunt you down. You know? And we came across fresh bear footprints. I saw a bear in the distance that luckily didn't approach. Yeah, the bears set a real deep fear. It's one thing thinking about going to China and doing the Yangtze Trek. It's another thing actually being on the Tibetan plateau and feeling the vulnerability and the fact that if a bear just sees you and decides it wants to eat you, you know, all your family, your friends, all your memories, everything, you're just nothing. You're just a carcass. You're just meat. You know, it's minging. And they were actively on the hunt because it was torpor season. So it's where the mountains get too cold for the bears. They come down from the mountains and they actively hunt before they go into hibernation. And that's the season you want to avoid. But because I was delayed 2.5 months, that was the season that I had to go in. But, you know, there was a lot against us. And that's why a lot of my team in China and the UK were saying, just stop, go again next year. Because it's not only the bears, you've already had 4 team members evacuated, you know, dropping into winter. All of the locals are advising against it. And when the locals advise against it, you know, you should listen. But, you know, there was just too much prep and focus on this. And I knew if I delayed it another year, and hey, if I did delay it another year, I would have been sent back from China anyway because of COVID-19. So Mission Yangtze wouldn't have been a thing. So if I listened, I would have been screwed over.
Yeah, you have to listen to that little gut feeling, you know, that little voice inside you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Ash, like you were talking about not mental sickness. You talked about altitude sickness. How do you prepare for that? Is there a way like that you can train yourself?
Yeah, you can gradually go up altitude. You know, you can. So the way that I didn't intentionally do it this way on purpose. I actually got stuck in these cities that happened to be at altitude. So I was gradually making my way closer to the source and working my way up, whereas some crew just didn't adjust to it as quick as I adjusted. And I don't know what that's down to. I think I like to put it down to the prep and how much I train and how a hold of my cardio system I have got. You know, I was still training the same way as I trained with Mongolia. The only difference is I strapped an altitude mask around my face. And whilst some people say that I've had scientists actually say, because I've been on podcasts as well, with scientists who have said that it has been proven that altitude masks do actually help, despite the big myth around them. There's a bit of a myth that they don't help. But either way, I always thought they actually help to build lung capacity, because as you're breathing in and breathing out, you're having to push harder, which ultimately strengthens your lungs. And it prepares you mentally as well, because no one wants to have that strapped to their face when they're training, you know? And so it could have been that, as well as me gradually working my way up in altitude. But for my guides and for my film crew, the first attempt to get to the source of the Yangtze River was a failed attempt. Because before we made it there, my whole film crew just disappeared because a bear was right where we were sleeping that morning, and they freaked, and so they left. They tried to blame it on the altitude sickness, and whilst they were hazy from the altitude sickness, I do believe it was fear of the local guy just saying, "Oh, there was a bear right where you were sleeping this morning," and they were just like, "I am out of here. I did not sign up for this," but they did sign up for it. That's the thing. I went through all of the prep. They knew there were bears, but that's the difference of thinking about it and being there. They were like, "Yeah, it'll be fine." And when they were there, they were like, "Yeah, fuck this. It's a whole different feeling, you know?" And they just left. And then my guide got altitude sickness, so that ultimately brought me off the mountains because I need to get him back to safety. And so there we were, 4 team members down, and I hadn't even made it to the start point yet. You know, so I was like, oh, so when I did make it to the start point, that was a mission in itself, just getting there. And then I was like, right, 352 days left.
Like starting a football match without substitutes.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I had to get off the mountains. I had to send all of the film crew back, and I had to have. In fact, I couldn't find new film crew to join me, so I just had to find 2 new guides, safety in numbers and whatnot. And I had a horse that we strapped the kit to, and we went back and we found the source. We went with a national park ranger this time, who took us straight to the true scientific source of the Yangtze River, and we started from there. And even still, for that next month after we started, we still went through like another 4 members of film crew within the next month. They just were dropping off. It was every time a production team sent a crew out, they were done, bleeding from the nose or vomiting. It was quite nasty. So we needed to get them off. But luckily no one died. You know, that's the main objective, is to get everyone back home safe with their family, you know.
But bears, like I didn't say it, but I mean they are scary, you know. Like, you said that you don't have a military background, but I assume that you did some training on like how to deal with wild animals, and because they're very good, they have a very good sense of smell.
Yeah, they do. With bears, it's just the typical stuff, really, common sense stuff. What I learned from the locals is it seems that mainly the Tibetans, you know, in the Tibetan and the Qinghai region, which is west of China, the biggest attacks happen when, you know, they come over the hill or go through the trees and they accidentally bump into a bear, and the bear panics because that gets scared and it just attacks. So when the farmers are out farming, they'll, you know, accidentally bump into a bear. And then there's obviously the torpor season when they do actively come down, and, you know, but the locals are more prepared for that. And so they, you know, barricade the doors, you know, try to chase them off. They set Chinese firecrackers to scare the bears and whatnot. So with me and my 2 guides, we had Chinese firecrackers that we actually didn't have to use for the bears, but we did have to use for the wild yak. The wild yak are different beasts. I never knew this. I just thought they were just like typical cows or cattle, you know, but the wild yak will mess you up. And if they feel threatened, even bears run from wild yak, you know, that's how brutal. They've been known to ram bears and kill horses. And we had Castor Troy with us, the horse, sorry. And we had to set Chinese firecrackers off because these 2 wild yaks, and they were big brutes as well, came way too close. And it was about 2 a.m. Luckily, it was my guide that somehow heard, I think he heard the disturbance of the horse. And he just looked, and there were these 2 glowing dark figures in the night sky and the hill in the distance, you know, freaky. So he got these Chinese firecrackers out, setting them off at 2 a.m, and the wild yak just panicked and ran. And then the bears, we had to use a lot of the whistleblower. You know, we had to blow our whistle to make sure, because if the bears knew that we were there, you know, 9 times out of 10, they'll want to step away. You know, they won't want to confront us, especially because it's three men and a horse. They'll see us, and it's a bit of a risk. If it's one person, they wouldn't care. But blowing the whistle, making loud noises, making sure that they hear you before you approach. Because if they don't hear you and you approach, they'll just attack you because they're scared. And so just common sense stuff, not eating too close to the tent either, eating and then walking further to camp.
Oh, wow. The Chinese firecrackers, I know how loud they are.
Yeah, they are loud, aren't they? Yeah, the yaks went running for the hills.
Yeah. Oh, wow. This is a blast, Ash, you know, just to hear your stories, you know. What's next? I mean, I don't know if you're allowed to share, but what's next?
Yeah, so we are planning some really exciting projects. I can't share just yet, unfortunately, but only because I'd like to share once it's all 100% confirmed and we've got the green light and the go ahead. But we're working on something very exciting on a few different things. And so I look to hopefully share on my Insta. I don't know if you're on Insta, but on my Instagram and website, hopefully in the next month or so is what I'm hoping. But we'll see. Me and the team are working hard to get this over the line sharpish. So, and it will be this year.
That's okay. That's super exciting. I just got on Instagram a couple of months ago, Ash.
Oh,
I
okay.
know. I
Nice.
know. I'm late to the game, but
Hey,
I'm
that's not
just.
a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. It's good to be honest, I only use it now because it's a lot of business. But yeah, my early days traveling, when I was doing all of these adventures, I wasn't promoting or sharing anything back then. I was just doing it for the pure passion of it. But now it seems a shame not to share these stories on Instagram.
It's true. It is true, Ash. I just have a few more questions.
Yeah.
Training. I've seen online that you're big into calisthenics. I think it's
Mm.
called in English. How did you
Yeah.
get into that?
I tell you what, I've always been into that actually. Since I was 13, 14 years of age, I've always been into, I think a lot of people just try to master heavy weights before they've learned to even master their own body. So they could bench press a huge ton, but they can't even do 5, 10 pull-ups with their own body. So I've always been more about being as practical as I possibly can and sharpening all of the tools, all components. And so, yeah, I was like, little things, flexibility, balance, all of this, it matters, especially on these expeditions. Reaction time, durability, inner core strength has always been vital. So I have always been into pull-ups. Is probably my favorite exercise, mastering like the one-handed pull-ups or the muscle-ups. I just love that stuff. Push-ups, sit-ups, all sorts of weird calisthenics movements. But also, you can bulk yourself with calisthenics as well. You just strap on your weighted vest, and that's it. You're adding more weight to the load then, and can grow in size if that's what you're looking to do. But I think it's easier on your joints, and it's just the way I've sort of always preferred. I do include weight workouts as well, because you've got to have that balance. Can't be all just calisthenics. But yeah, predominantly if I'm traveling in hotels or whatnot, I only need a pull-up bar. And even if I don't have that, just push-ups and sit-ups to stay in shape or to stay on form is good for me. And some squats, keep the legs sharp. So calisthenics you can take all over the world whilst you're traveling.
It's true. I've seen you muscle ups. I've actually been training for 3 years now. Like I'm doing CrossFit and Brazilian Jiu
Excellent.
Jitsu. And
Yeah.
I've found gymnastics really interesting because
Yeah.
it's so challenging and I get to know my body more.
Yeah, 100%. And that gymnasts are the perfect sort of when it comes to calisthenics and brute strength. The gymnasts probably top it as number one. The stuff they can do with their body on the rings, and they have probably pound for pound, probably the strongest people on the planet.
I think so. I think so. But I've been trying to do muscle up for 3 years, and I managed to do my first one last week, actually.
Excellent. So. Congrats. Hey, it's the best feeling, isn't it?
I know. Finally, finally.
You feel so pathetic when you first ever attempt a muscle up and you're like, yay, great.
Yeah. And I'm like, was it that hard? It wasn't that hard,
Yeah, once you build up all of that strength as well and work on that formation, on that technique. Yeah, and you never really forget how to do it. Obviously, you do lose the strength if you don't do your pull-ups. But once you build up that strength, you'll be able to then continue doing your muscle-ups.
Ash, I was thinking about something throughout our almost 2 hour conversation here is that you've been like entrusting yourself in people's random act of kindness. Everywhere you're gone, whether that's Africa or Asia or whatever, you've been entrusting yourself and not just like believing that, well, I'm going to receive kindness and people's going to help me.
Yeah.
That's true, right?
I have always been like that. Yeah, a lot of people have said that, I have a lot of trust and faith in humanity. I don't write people off. Bad things can happen, and if they do, just learn, adapt, get over it. I just believe that the world is full of negativity if negativity is what you choose to seek, whereas for me, I prefer the opposite. The world is even more so full of positivity. Yeah, the negative things will creep up every now and then, but they will in anything you ever do in life anyway. And so I've always been very open-hearted, open-minded, and believed that, there's more great people than bad people out there. And luckily I have never really been, a few times, been caught off guard. Not really off guard, because I always know that bad things can happen, but don't rest on that. Don't rest on the fact that bad things are going to happen, so I'm not going to do this. Concentrate on the good shit that is going to happen, not the bad stuff that might happen, and people are amazing. Yeah, you rock up to a gur in Mongolia, they see a sunburned, hungry, dehydrated, sweaty man. 9 times out of 10, they're going to invite you in, sit you down in the shade, give you water, and even lay out a bed and offer you a bed for the night. Or offer you food. And, it's very rare people are going to say, there's a stranger, don't come here. And I've done it in the UK as well. I have done it whereby I cycled the UK when I was 20 for the NSPCC, raising funds. Completely solo and unsupported. Again, just a bicycle. Johnny Groats to Land's End. And sometimes at night I would rock up in a city, not where I wanted to end up. I prefer to get out in the countryside so that I camp. But, now I'm in a city. I knocked on people's doors and I asked if I can camp in their back garden. They're like, yeah, I'll bring you a cup of tea too. I'm like, happy days.
I love it.
There's only one person that closed their door on my face, but he was an older man and he probably felt a little bit threatened. So I didn't hold him. I was just like, okay, fair dues. No, that's all right. Continued to knock on the other door and they were like, yeah. So it's here in the UK too. It's everywhere. It's there's good people everywhere.
I certainly believe so too. Yeah.
Not quite to the Cambodian local standards, though. Hey, the Cambodians still top it for me.
Yeah, it makes me really proud and happy, to hear that.
Yeah, you should be, man. Yeah, no, that they just really stand out as there wasn't one bad thing that happened in Cambodia. Yeah, which is great.
I'll tell you a quick story. My aunt on my father's side, she's married to a doctor in a small village, 2-3 hours from Phnom Penh in Takao. I don't know if you know that.
I went there. I cycled there.
I'm sure you did. So there's only one hospital.
Yeah.
And what happened was that he helped a farmer, somebody who lived in the remote place.
Yeah.
So we were invited to their, not house, but their huts, basically. Right. Which is basically houses made of leaves. And they were cooking lunch for us.
Yeah.
Which was, they had caught 1 or 2 of their chickens or hens that they were owning. Yeah. And cooking them for us,
Yeah.
And offering us their sodas and beers that they had purchased just specifically for us. And man, that hospitality and eating a chicken that it doesn't taste like in the UK or in Europe, man.
No. Pure.
It's basically full of bone, not much meat, those chicken, but that's the real deal.
That's true. I remember now. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Lots more bones than meat, wasn't it? Yeah.
It is. Yeah. It's full of muscles,
Yeah. And hey, in Madagascar, when I was with my local guide and we would get to a community and we would eat the chickens, which were very similar, more bone than meat, they'd eat the bones.
Oh, wow.
Straight up eat all the bones. I obviously left my bones and they would eat mine. They would ask, oh, are you going to leave? Are you going to finish that? And I'm like, I have finished. And they're like, no, you haven't. You've left all the bones. And I'm like, well. And they would actually chew and eat and swallow the bones. I'm like, oh, my God.
But Ash, I wanted to ask you about all your adventures. Have people stolen things from you? I'm sure some bad things happened to you, but in short, did somebody steal something from you?
Yeah. So in Mongolia, I had my solar panel stolen. It was in the nicest possible way. He kind of was out chilling outside my tent, drinking some tea with me. And when I wasn't looking, he slid a solar panel underneath my tent, and I didn't see. And I didn't see that. And then when I went to bed and made sure that everything was in my tent that night, which it was, I went in my tent and I felt a tug about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. And then I just shouted, hello. And then I just heard someone running off. And I thought maybe I scared them. But then the next morning, I realized I couldn't find my solar panel. And then I clicked that tug because it came like from underneath me, from under the tent. That tug was like he had pre-planted the solar panel underneath to wait for me to go to bed and then pull it and run. And he did. And then just that evening, I was having tea with him. However, there were some builders that came by, and I asked if I can use their phone to call my agent because I was a solar panelist. And they got wind of that. There was a guy that spoke a bit of English, and he understood. And it was amazing. They said, if you can walk 30 kilometers, along your route, there's a little like a camp where the builders are staying. You can go there. We can see if we've got a solar panel for you. You can charge everything. You can shower, we'll feed you, and you can stay the night. And they were really, really angry with the nomad for taking the solar panel. And they were going around asking the questions, where is it? Where is it? And I know the one that took it, but he was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I know the one that took it, but he just played it well. But I thought fair dues, and they were just, construction workers. And they were like really offended that he had taken my solar panel. And so whilst there was that one little negative, there was a band of positivity come from like this band of brothers who said, walk 30 kilometers and you can stay ours, charge everything, shelter, wash your clothes, do whatever. And we'll say goodbye to you the next day. Oh, I was like, oh, that's so nice. So good of them. And I did. I made it. And it was a great experience.
Wow. Wonderful, Ash. Do you travel for pleasure? Like, I mean, I know you go on these adventures. Like, do you go to visit some islands to relax, or do you ever do that?
I do. Yeah, I do. I think some people view me as this sort of wild man, always living extreme, but I do like my extreme luxuries as well. I like my first class suites and my good hotels. You've got to adapt. You've got to enjoy the best of both worlds. And so whilst I can do extreme living, sleeping with absolutely nothing, I do enjoy, just being in a nice hotel or a beach hut on an island somewhere, for sure, doing some scuba diving or surfing love it.
That's very nice. It's good, Ash, for you, to have that balance,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
This has been amazing. It's been an amazing chat, Ash. I'm sure that I had a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed it as well. Where can people find out more about you online, and where can they go and say hello to you on social media?
Yeah, man. So if people are interested in seeing what happens next, I have got the Instagram, which is just Ash_Dykes. If they want to know more, there is my book called Mission Possible. And then just the standard website or the Facebook or Twitter, which is just my name again.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show, Ash.
It's been great. It's been great. Thanks for having me, and all the best. Enjoy Barcelona, man. I'm jealous.
Thank you, Ash. Thank you for listening to Fika with Rice. I hope you enjoyed the show. Who do you want to have on our show? Let us know by sending me an email at fredrik@absoluteinternship.com. And before you go, if you like this conversation, don't forget to subscribe to our show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, or Spotify to get to listen to more inspirational stories and life hacks. We'll really appreciate it. See you next time, and much gratitude for listening.